I think it's fair to say that beasts are the most overlooked type of monster in the D&D bestiary by far. They typically don't have any fancy abilities, and they often can't really challenge a group of mid to high level adventurers on their own. They're just simply a mundane group of creatures. While not usually the most exciting, they do, however, fulfill some of the most important yet understated roles in any tabletop game. The fearless knight, for instance, relies on his horse to carry him into battle. The diligent farmer needs his livestock to feed the village. And the innkeeper needs you to go clear out some giant rats in his cellar, thus kicking off countless adventuring careers in so doing. Beasts are incredibly important to the world of D&D, and that is what makes them so interesting. They're not always here to challenge the players, but sometimes just to make the world feel more alive. Now, there is a somewhat arbitrary line that gets drawn between beasts and monstrosities. A cow, for instance, is a pretty clear example of a beast, but give that cow some metallic armor plates and some stinky breath that turns people into stone, now it's a monstrosity. Generally speaking, beasts in D&D are always naturally occurring, they've got low intelligence, and they don't have any supernatural powers. This logic tends to get a little muddy when we account for the fact that in most D&D settings, there are degrees of natural magic, and there are also environments that would never be able to truly exist in the real world. So you end up with something like the Vesarab being considered a beast, but it doesn't really break any of the vague rules that make something a beast or not a beast, so here we are.
The code is more what you call guidelines than actual rules.
Speaking of here, usually when we talk about D&D monsters as they're presented in various monster manuals and whatnot across most editions of the game, here is the Forgotten Realms. The Realms are indeed one of the least forgotten places of all time, and a lot of books just kind of adopt them as the default state of how things are in Dungeons & Dragons, even if the book in question specifically isn't about a Forgotten Realms product or location. But as remembered as the Realms may be, there is one part of the Forgotten Realms that actually tends to go mostly forgotten these days, and that is one of the two primary planets. I promise this isn't going to devolve into a Forgotten Realms lore video, there wouldn't be enough time. But if you ask most people what the name of the world they're on in D&D is, you're probably going to be met with a shrug and a confused face, or they might say Toril, which isn't wrong. But way back in the day, the world used to be called Abeir-Toril, and then the biggest, baddest god of them all split the place in half, which is why the world is simply referred to as Toril now. But Abeir still exists, and there's a ton of crazy shit happening over there, mostly to do with dragons. But they have dungeons too. Oh, that's why it's called. So when I decided I wanted to do an episode featuring a beast on the channel, and Mr. Beast didn't respond to my emails, I realized we got a whole other world of weird flora and fauna that literally never gets talked about anymore. So I decided to peek over the fence into Abeir's backyard and see what kind of little critters they had crawling around. It turns out there's a lot of them, and some of them are super cool. In the Forgotten Realms campaign guide for D&D 4th edition, there is a ton of really interesting stuff, but the focus of today's video is going to be two specific beasts, both of which hail from the twin world of Abeir. The first of these two beasts is a little species of humble lizard known as the Zairtail. And while their name might sound like a move input for a Super Smash Bros. Character, they are indeed just cute little lizards. Little lizards who contain a tremendous capacity for death and destruction. I mean, just look at the one and only official art piece of them that we have. If some poor guy getting dominated and shredded to bits by a swarm of the little fellas doesn't explain what their general vibe is, I don't know what to tell you. Obviously, these small beasts are prone to traveling in swarms, but not all swarms of lizards are created equally. Zairtails come in 4 varieties: fire tongues, depicted in the original artwork, bone breakers, which are the largest and most physically capable of the lot, cutters, who are basically the rogues of the species, and gazers, the big-eyed hypnotoads of the Zairtail world. They all share the same general pattern of behavior. They join into swarms that travel in large groups, and they nest together in places not easily accessible to other creatures. However, for all their similarities, each one of them has a unique trait that makes their subspecies truly unique and potentially very dangerous. The fire tongues, unsurprisingly, can spit a small stream of burning bile not entirely dissimilar from horned lizards in the real world, although in the case of the fire tongues, it causes literal fire damage as it burns their prey. Cutters are equipped with razor-sharp talons that allow them to deal a tremendous, relatively speaking, amount of damage to their prey, literally cutting them down to size. Gazers, which which are by far the weirdest of them all, have a set of big old eyes that allow them to not only perceive any potential threats far in advance, but also draw in foes and temporarily hypnotize them for a brief window of time. And then there's the bone breakers, which don't have any fancy tricks. They're just much bigger than the others, making them harder to take down and nearly impossible to pry off if they manage to clamp on with their crushing jaws. What makes these creatures especially fun though, aside from their unique traits, is that each variety can be trained and domesticated for a variety of purposes. Cutters, for example, are often used like carrier pigeons in larger cities by thieves guilds and others who wish to have their messages delivered as covertly as possible. I'll get more into some of the specific details in a bit here, but first I need to tell you about the other half of this creature double feature, the Scathebeast. Scathebeasts, also from Abeir, are large cow-like beasts, although instead of having black spots and udders, these guys have a physique reminiscent of a slug. They very much have 4 legs, but their body is so large and condensed that when they move around, they often appear to be crawling akin to a slug or a snail. This comparison is also drawn because of the long and winding trails they leave in the grass behind them as they trawl across the land. The Scathebeasts secrete a highly acidic substance that helps them break down and consume the massive amount of foliage they need to survive, but also leaves a trail of dead grass in their wake. The mucus that covers their bodies can also be altered to make them more or less resistant to certain types of damage, which is pretty sick. So all that disgusting and vile slime isn't just for aesthetic purposes. But how are these two very different creatures connected, I hear you ask, scared and confused at the incongruous nature of the video's topic? Well, one of the Zairtail's favorite places to live is in fact on the back of the Scathebeast's hide. Much like those weird long fishes that hang out on the bottom of sharks, the Zairtail swarms often travel atop the backs of the massive Scathebeast in a sort of symbiotic relationship. The Scathebeast naturally takes the Zairtails to lush and verdant lands rich with resources, with the small lizards being relatively unobtrusive to the massive creatures, and should anyone or anything place a threat to the Scathebeast before them, well, they've got a horde of ravenous lizards on their back waiting to turn any would-be predators into a skeleton. These creatures are extremely cool additions to the general ecology of any world, and that's just the beginning of why these beasts should be in no way slept on. But you know what should be slept on? An impossibly comfortable and satisfyingly firm plank mattress. I can't help it, gang. I'm just too good at these seamless transitions. Thank you so much to Plank for sponsoring this video and for sending me a lovely new mattress to try out for myself. I decided to go for a queen-size Plank Firm Luxe mattress and just put it straight on my bed frame so I could test it out, and I gotta say, after having this thing for a couple weeks, it's a firm mattress enjoyer's dream. See, the thing about being old enough to have actually played D&D 3rd edition back in its heyday is that my back is approaching the venerable age category, which is great for my wisdom and bad for my constitution. What I'm saying is that it was time for a firmer mattress, ideally one that would help me wake up in the morning without the sound of every bone in my body creaking like an abandoned playground. And Plank mattresses are not only endorsed by the American Chiropractic Association, they are also flippable with 2 different levels of firmness, so whether you want something firm with a little bit of give, or like me, you want to be lulled to sleep on a slab, you've got flexibility, and your body will probably have a lot more flexibility too. The mattress was super easy to order online. It arrived in this big old box, and just like that, I unrolled it on the bed. Easy peasy. My mattress also came with the optional cooling cover on one side, which, as someone who always goes to bed cold and then wakes up with heat stroke, I couldn't wait to try out. This bad boy passed every test I could think of and then some. My back is feeling good, waking up at a normal temperature for a human body is great, and Gaston seems to love it as well. Honestly, as anyone with a big dog will tell you, the bed is more of his than mine, so his endorsement is the only one that really matters here. My Plank mattress was a total game changer, and if you too are on the hunt for an ultra firm bed, check out the links below and get 30% off your order with code DungeonDad. All caps, no spaces. Plank's bringing factory direct quality, super reasonable prices, a limited lifetime warranty, free shipping, and they even let you try it out for 120 nights, which is more than enough time to decide if the mattress is for you. Shouts out to Plank for sponsoring this beastly video. Speaking of which, let's get back to our dynamic duo and see just exactly what they can do. Starting with the Zairtails, it should come as no surprise that they range from CR 1/4 to a whopping CR 1 in the case of the Bonebreaker and Cutters. Being 4th edition monsters, they have very specific niches in combat to fulfill, and I converted their stat blocks in order order to reflect that. They've all got a bite attack and a decent movement speed, and a reaction called Skitter, which they can use to move around the battlefield when a threat presents itself. But as for their unique trait, the fire tongues are the only ones with a ranged attack option. Their burning bile acts as a single target ranged attack that causes fire damage. They also have a trait similar to the Remoraz that causes damage to anyone who hits them with a melee attack, so predator deterrence all around. The next step up in terms of challenge rating is the Gazer, who on account of their sticky toe pads has spider climb, meaning they can hang from the ceiling, and they've got those big ass eyeballs which can potentially stun a single creature for a single turn if they fail a wisdom saving throw against their ability. They're also the dirty snitches of the Zairtail world and can use their bonus action to emit a warning call, allowing for all other Zairtails within 60 feet to use their reaction to move up to their speed. This is great for calling in some backup if the nest is under attack, and for allowing their allies to get out of a bad situation if they find themselves in danger. Next up is the Bonebreaker at CR1, who doesn't really do anything fancy, but does have a very damaging bite, a ton of hit points relative to the others, and an alligator-like jaw-locking mechanism that makes them very difficult to pry off another creature once they've clamped down. This not only means they deal extra damage to creatures they have grappled each round, but you also can't force a grapple to end just by moving them. If the target of their grapple moves, either they're going with the target or the target's coming with them. So be careful if you decide to shove one of them off a cliff or something, because your beloved comrade might be going over the side with them. Lastly, we have the Cutter, the fastest of the Zairtails, equipped with a razor-sharp talon that can do high damage and also facilitate the creature's slicing charge action, a recharge attack that enables the Zairtail to dash around the battlefield and deal slashing damage to anyone or anything it manages to pass within 5 feet of during its movement. It's a pretty deadly ability, and I think it's kind of fun. But the final thing you'll see on my 5e conversion is of course the Zairtail Swarm stat block, a CR2 version of this creature that consists of many individuals in a swarm. Who doesn't love a swarm of lizards? Originally, this stat block didn't have any of the special abilities and just sort of operated as a ball of hungry lizards, which I thought was kind of underwhelming. So in my conversion, the general bones of the 4th edition stat block are the same. It's a swarm of little guys, it can make a swarm of bites, and it can strip a man down to a skeleton in under a minute. But I also included optional features and traits on the stat block, so that depending on what species of Zairtail constitute the swarm, it gets access to some of their more unique traits, but swarmified. As for the Scathebeast, their stat block was a bit more straightforward to convert, but even as a lowly beast, they still have some really cool tricks to pull out. Clocking in at CR4, they have a terrible armor class and 94 hit points, which at first glance might seem pretty underwhelming given how easy they are to hit. But thanks to their adaptive mucus, as a reaction, when they take damage from any source other than force, psychic, or thunder, they can gain resistance to that type of damage until they complete a long rest, which is really interesting. Basically, that means the longer the fight goes on, the more the creature attacking the Scathebeast will need to change its tactics in order to avoid having their damage cut in half every time. I think that's a really fun little combat puzzle for the group. They've also got a crush attack and a ranged acid spit attack, which are sort of just the creature's bog standard damage dealing actions, but if things get really heated, it can always bust out its slime spray action, which allows the Scathebeast to unleash a torrent of mucus in a 15-foot cone, dealing a bunch of acid damage and potentially making anyone caught in the area get stuck in place until they can break free or wash away the slime, taking acid damage for their trouble each turn that they remain trapped. So now, just imagine dealing with all of that while a swarm of angry bile-spewing lizards leaps from the thing's back in a ravenous feeding frenzy. Though admittedly, that is just one of the many ways you can use this creature. In fact, there are countless ways you can use these beasts, both as combat encounters or merely as fauna to make your world feel that much more lived in. First and foremost though, if you're gonna incorporate these bad boys into your world, you need to think of the druids. Good God, won't someone think of the druids? Since these creatures are legally considered beasts, that means a druid can potentially use their furry adjacent magical abilities to turn into one of the many Zairtails, or potentially even a Scathebeast if they want to be all Debussy about it. I think that's fine. It's probably fine, but it's just something to be aware of. So either make them monstrosities in your setting or accept the fact that at some point a party member may decide they want to become an acidic slug cow. The other consideration worth making here is that in the case of the Zairtails, they make great candidates for employment as a spellcaster's familiar. Whether we're talking about an NPC or a particularly cool player who you want to give the opportunity to have a slightly more powerful and unique familiar option, one of the Zairtail species could make for a great little companion. I also think the next time I have a player running a warlock with Pact of the Chain, giving them access to the Zairtails as potential familiars for their expanded list of new best friends is a very fun option. Now all that said, since these guys are beasts, meaning they naturally come into being, what the heck did they evolve from in the first place? Zairtails, if you can believe it, actually have a common ancestor way back with the cast of true dragons. I truly have no idea what evolutionary path could have possibly led them to be this little gremlin lizard instead of the all-powerful apex predator, but I suppose stranger things have happened even in the real world. Shouts out to chickens. But this is yet another funny little connection here between them and the Scathebeasts, because Scathebeasts are so prolific on Abeir largely because dragons really enjoy the taste of their flesh. Yeah, it turns out there's nothing a true dragon loves more than a certified AAA cut of Scathebeast steak on the family barbecue. So there's a whole cottage industry of Scathebeast farmers who raise them specifically to sell or trade as a food source to whatever dragon happens to own the part of the world they call home. Some dragons even go as far as to attack creatures they see harassing Scathebeasts in the wild in order to ensure that they are as plentiful as possible. So if you ever end up in an altercation with one of these things, hopefully there isn't a dragon flying overhead who happens to notice. As for where the Scathebeast developed from, yeah, your guess is as good as mine on that one. There is some obscure lore about a dragonborn myth where they believe that the first Scathebeasts were actually created by evil dragons who were experimenting on dragonborn slaves, but there is literally no evidence in-world to support that theory, and it's pretty well disregarded as a myth by scholars, though that doesn't stop some particularly superstitious dragonborn from refusing to eat, engage in combat with, or otherwise interact with Scathebeasts, so that's a little bit of fun world building. And who knows, maybe it turns out that the rumor is actually true and your heroes go on a whole adventure about it, trying to lift the Scathebeast curse. Another thing worth mentioning is that these animals have their uses beyond just food or companionship. I'm sure that some alchemist out there has found a great use for the Scathebeast slime, possibly making it a highly valuable reagent for potions of damage resistance. I really like the idea that even a party member with an alchemist supply kit might collect some Scathebeast mucus and use it to concoct a potion that gives you damage resistance for 8 hours to the next type of damage you take. Could be really useful and a cool way to give the players a powerful magical item without just handing it to them in the bottom of a chest or something. Or maybe you've got a Scathebeast farm, and rather than using the animals for meat, the farmers actually collect the mucus from the creatures and sell it to the local alchemist. However, it seems a young dragon has moved into a nearby mountain range and is picking off the farmer's herd one by one. So of course, they offer to pay the adventuring party a hefty sum to go and deal with it. There's also always the possibility that a bunch of Zairtails have moved in and are now living on the Scathebeast, attacking anyone who gets close, so maybe instead of having to deal with a legit dragon, a much lower level party has to find a way to clear out the Zairtails without harming the Scathebeast and decimating the farmer's livestock. As for the Zairtails, they also have their own unique uses. The rough skin of a fire-tongue Zairtail can be used to craft makeshift torches in a pinch, and the oils present in the eyes of gazer Zairtails are considered precious reagents in the creation of expensive inks used for crafting magic scrolls. There is even specific mention in the book of assassins training cutter Zairtails to carry out assassinations, giving them an object with the target's scent, setting a few of them loose in the target's house, and allowing them to slay their mark before the group returns to the assassin who is lurking somewhere nearby, leaving the investigating authorities very little evidence of who actually perpetrated the foul deed in the first place. So having a murder mystery investigation where the weapon was a swarm of trained lizards is certainly an interesting spin, especially if a member of the adventuring adventuring party is the target. But however you choose to use these little critters, or the big ol' slug-like beasts of burden, I think they can all offer yet another dash of interesting and weird wildlife to make your game world just that much more livable and believable. I know when it comes to animals of the world, many worlds, official and homebrew alike, have specific and unique ways that they like to handle these things, so please let me know how you would incorporate these creatures into your game world. If you do decide that's something you want to do, as always, linked below is my 5th edition conversion of all 6 creature stat blocks, so check them out and set them loose on your players. And if you're one of my lovely patrons over on the Dungeon Dad Patreon page, you can find the high resolution PDF stat block with all the same information as the Google Doc, but with some more fanciful flair. Plus, it helps support me in the show, so thank you so much to all the patrons out there for making this show possible, and a special thank you to this week's randomly selected Patron of the Week. Thank you so much to Neon for your luminescent amount of support. It means the most. And thank you so much for watching. As always, if there's a monster you'd like to see on a future episode of Monster of the Week, let me know in the comments down below, or in the Dungeon Dad Discord server, which is also linked down below somewhere, and who knows? You might just see it show up on a future episode of Monster of the Week. The Zairtails and the Scathebeast in particular were recommended by a handful of folks over the past month or two since I started asking for recommendations of beasts specifically, so thank you so much to everyone who got in the comments with all kinds of incredible recommendations for beasts to cover. There was a lot of really good ones, and I think the way I've decided I'm probably going to do beasts going forward is do these little like zoo episodes where basically we just talk about like 2 to 5 different beasts and kind of do a single episode about a group of them that all fit together in some meaningful way. Just because one of these 2 creatures probably wouldn't have been enough to fill a full episode, at least in my opinion, as I like to make them, but I think doing multiple beasts sort of solves that problem. So I don't know. Let me know what you think. Also, I just want to say a very special thank you to everyone who came out to say hi and watch my first ever live show on the Gen Con main stage this past August. I was super fortunate to play in an amazing one-shot with some awesome people. We had a packed convention hall and some really crazy visuals provided by Chepaku, who sponsored the event, which was very cool of them. It was all just really great, and I am so grateful to all the folks who came out to see us and said hi. I do think there is a VOD going live somewhere of the game in case you missed it and missed the live stream, but I'll link to that wherever it ends up down below, so if you want to check it out, you can. But ultimately, I just want to express my gratitude and acknowledge how awesome it was to see some of you in the real world. Shouts out to that person close to the front row who laughed at all my dad jokes. You are a pillar of this community. But that's all I got for you this week. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Till then.